Hello, everyone. My name is Donny Winter, and welcome to my show, Growing Up with Godzilla. This is a show where I have conversations with Godzilla fans about how they've evolved with the character and the franchise throughout their lives. It's created some fascinating conversation, and I've learned a lot about not only myself, but other people as they have engaged in this conversation with me. This episode, episode 8, continues the conversation that I had with the wonderfully talented artist, Matt Frank, and I hope that you enjoy it. Here it is. Okay, so you mentioned Varan the Unbelievable. Are there any other, kaiju films that, really resonate with you off the top of your head, and why?
I'm looking at my shelf over here of all my kaiju movies and stuff. There's always going to be specific Godzilla movies that really speak to me. GMK is my number one favorite Godzilla movie, and Norman England's book, Behind the Kaiju Curtain, is a really great journal diary of the making of that film. Really from a human perspective, you really get a sense of what the vibe was.
Mm-hmm.
So that movie really means a lot to me. And of course, the early Showa stuff is just mwah, just so choice. I'm a big fan of non-Godzilla Toho stuff. I love Frankenstein Conquers the World. I love Matango. Space Amoeba is a lot better than I think people remember it being, because I think everybody thinks about how goofy Gezora looks.
Right, I've only seen that once. I need to, and it was a long time ago. I should give it a rewatch now that I'm older and more capable of analytical thought.
Yeah, I'm my assistant Caston is I'm really kind of having to introduce her to a lot of kaiju stuff, and I thought the thing to do first would be to kind of go for either more recent stuff or goofier, more bombastic stuff Destroy All Monsters or Final Wars or King of the Monsters. But turns out when I showed her Gojira and then GMK and Shin Godzilla, she was like, I like these. I like it when they kind of are a little more serious, and it's oh, so you like the ones that are actual good movies. So not to throw any shade, but there is a bar. There are.
Oh yeah, for sure. I completely agree. Don't get me wrong. As much as I love the Mothra trilogy, I know that they are not the pinnacle of cinematic perfection. As much as I might argue they are, but
Well, they're very light. They're light. They're digestible.
Right.
They're
right.
colorful. I mean, I watched the whole trilogy in an entire day with my friends Jennifer and Quinn, who have both done Giganticast episodes with me. And Jennifer is like a Mothra stan herself, even though she doesn't know that much about Godzilla, but she just got locked in on Mothra. And so I'm like, oh, we're watching the Mothra trilogy. Y'all are coming over and we're just spending the whole day watching Mothra movies. So that it's a lot of fun.
That makes me feel so wholesome. So, all right. So how has Godzilla shaped you into who you are today beyond that of being an artist?
I think that it sort of ties into the question of why this, why Godzilla, or, which I would compare to why Star Wars, why Marvel Comics, why, some people are really into Dune. Those people are weird, but it's
What's Dune? I'm kidding.
No, Dune is. I'm listening.
Dune is stunning. Yeah,
I'm listening to the audiobook right now, and whoof, it is dense.
It is.
But I think that it's really hard to quantify exactly why we're drawn to certain things, because you could throw a couple of qualifiers out there, and then, somebody listening to that will just turn around and say well, yeah, but all those things are present in this other stuff. And it's well, yeah, but I don't watch that stuff. I watch this stuff. I watch Godzilla movies. And and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with having a preference. I do think it's important to broaden your horizons and to
Oh
watch
yeah.
stuff that's not the same thing over and over again. Like I recently watched Shusuke Kaneko's Crossfire
Mm.
Pyrokinesis, which is I know he's one of my favorite directors, and even I'm just like, oh my god, that was really good. That was really well
Mhm.
made. Why did I sleep on this for so long? Um, but when it comes to specifically how I think it shaped me, I think that being a Godzilla fan, I think that the deeper you dive and the more you dig into it, and especially the more you listen and not project, because I know some fans that like know a lot about this stuff, and yet they they put their own meaning on it in a way that's like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with attaching your own meaning to something, but when you go so far as to just like go in a completely opposite direction and just like just and you probably know what I'm talking about. I don't want to say specifics, but there are fans out there who, you know, they try to attach really specific meanings to this stuff that quite frankly just isn't there, and I think they
It gets
and
gatekeepy.
yeah, it can get gatekeepy, and it can
Mhm.
also get it's still a very juvenile way of looking at it,
Mhm.
of trying to attach meanings to things that aren't there. Um, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Anyway, I'm sorry. I keep
Well,
flip
no,
flopping
like
on that.
no, like, I completely see where you're coming from, like, there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, so long as it's not weaponized against people.
That's a did you fu- sorry, I don't want to curse too much.
Psychic. No, you're good, I'm
Same
okay
brain,
with that.
same brain. It's just if you're not using it against people or using it to make your build yourself up, because like I think what's important is you mature with the franchise,
Yeah.
and part of that is understanding not just the intent behind it but the people behind it, because these are films and this is a franchise and a genre really born in another culture.
Oh, yeah.
And if you take time to understand aspects of that culture, especially the aspects that are counter to your own, it broadens your worldview. And I like to think I'm a fairly expansive person. I like to think that I'm a fairly open minded person, you know? I mean, like, I remembered, sorry, I just, this flash in my
Flash.
head of when I was really younger, much, much
Mhm.
younger, and not really understanding what it meant to be gay or LGBTQ, and being kind of like icked out by it because I'm like, ew, that's weird. And then I saw the episode of The Simpsons with John Waters, and literally all it took was a gay character who was like, what do you have against gay people? And Homer being like, you took the best names we had. And it's like, that's not an answer. But my point is that I think if you understand the people and the reasoning and rationalization behind your favorite media, you then understand the people a little better, and that helps expand your horizons. And with the kaiju genre in particular, the core perspective is how small humanity really is. Like it's that speech by Raymond Burr at the end of Godzilla 85. It's being reminded how small you are, but you can make a difference, but it's got to be in, you got to do your best. And sometimes you can't make a difference, but that doesn't mean you don't try.
Well,
Like,
and that's the thing that also brings us all together, the universal thing that we connect with, right? The
mm-hmm,
fact that we're all small because we are all part of that,
mm-hmm,
like, grand scheme of things, like nature being like this overarching thing, right?
right.
Whereas we are, minuscule compared to that.
Yeah, and it's like that's one of the reasons why these last few years I think have been so hard, especially for the Godzilla fans who saw these movies and saw and had an understanding of empathy out of them for like for your fellow man, for like being able to come together and and kind of form a bulwark against this chaotic universe that will just snuff you out like that. I think that it's been really hard for a lot of us because that illusion has been shattered of like, oh, if there was an alien invasion we would all band together and fight back, and it's like, no, we wouldn't. There's there's always going to be people whose self-interest are going to supersede anyone else, And
Right.
as we've seen in the Godzilla franchise, especially, that always bites you in the ass because, I mean, it's literally a core theme of like several movies. Like Godzilla, Mothra versus Godzilla is entirely like a pretty big anti-capitalist movie.
Mhm.
Um, and I still have not properly sat down to read the Ishiro Honda biography. I mean, I've skimmed it a little bit, but it's really hard for me to sit down and read books these days. So I'm
Yeah.
working all the damn time. But I think that that's but but these last few years have given me a new perspective on these films, like Gamera Guardian of the Universe. It's a movie about this crisis, and the government thinks it can benefit from this crisis directly. And so it brings in these scientists, but it only listens to them up to where they can use the information. And then if they say anything else, they're just ignored.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you have Gamera, which can't be quantified and cannot be controlled and can't be monetized. So, and all he does is property damage. So they're like, oh, we have to destroy that. That's the threat. We
Yeah.
have This thing is a threat to our society, and to not so much our society, but to our control and our economy. Whereas the Gauss represents a larger existential threat that is not apparent yet, like climate change. And they only want to try to monetize it rather than directly address it. So I'm just like, and I know these are maybe obvious themes, especially when you're like a kid watching these movies for the first time, but now it's so much more real.
Well, like, yeah, if there's like a real world application for these themes, like they take on a whole nother size, no pun intended, right? And I think about this as well, like when it comes to like the Kiryu saga, like Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Godzilla Tokyo SOS, because we see many of those similar themes take place, like
Mhm.
right where you have mankind wanting to, you know, create a think tank of people to build like this mechanical creature to defend, like there's like ramifications about capitalism, the environment, etc. So I just think that there's so much that we can glean from the films and the characters, and each individual can take something different away, which I think deserves celebration, right?
I think that's a really good point. I think that it's one of the reasons why, and I know we said we weren't going to get too political, but
Let's get political, Matt. I love it.
there's one thing that I think is important to recognize, and that is one of the reasons why. And this doesn't just apply to Godzilla fans. This applies to any pop culture fandom, any pop culture community, and why there is this pushback against politicize political themes, and pushback against wokeness. Which, if
Mhm.
you use wokeness unironically, you are not an adult. Stop
Oh,
it.
I get so annoyed at wokeness being used as a weapon.
Because it's
Like as like a weapon against like people trying to care about human beings. Anyway, go on. Sorry, I interrupted
no,
you.
it's totally fair, because it's like I think there's a conversation to be had about corporations using and there are great videos about this by H Bomber Guy and Lindsay Ellis. Corporations using the language of social justice and the imagery of social justice as a marketing tool. I think there's a conversation to be had about that. But if you're getting bent out of shape because there's a woman with Thor's hammer now,
Oh,
I think you're
right.
missing the point. Like, you're missing the forest for the trees. Like, you didn't say it was political correctness when Captain America got it. Like, it's because it's it's fine. It's fine.
Mhm.
Okay. The point the point I'm trying to make is that I do think that we should have a little bit of patience, because uh one of the reasons why people have a pushback against this, I don't think is as nefarious as a lot of us like to think it is. I truly believe that it's simply because it's too real. It's too
Right.
real, and that makes it uncomfortable. The idea that, like, because we had a high old time a few weeks ago sharing Godzilla is gay memes on Twitter, and mostly we were taking the piss, but we were also like kind of trying to get a conversation going.
Right,
And
yeah. Well, a conversation about representation and what people take away from the character, right?
right. And like, I think Godzilla's sexuality is kind of a moot point. I think that's more to do with what is the demands of the plot,
Mhm.
because when Godzilla 98 happened and Godzilla was laying eggs, we were all like, that's stupid. But then Shin Godzilla starts like budding and creating new Godzillas when pieces of its body fall off, or whatever, Godzilla asexually reproducing in the Godzilla anime trilogy or whatever. And we didn't really bat an eye at that. And I think that's because Godzilla 98 doesn't have a very good story. I don't hate that movie, but I think that because the story didn't really pull you in, as a result, those elements fall flat. They feel
Right.
very mechanical. They feel like, well, we don't have anything for Act Three, so let's do this. But anyway, and I think that when you have these elements that are just too real and too modern, like I've had these arguments with people who are like, keep politics out of Godzilla, and then I'll respond with, Godzilla's been political since day one. It's a
Mhm.
nuclear war allegory, and they're like, oh well, that's fine, I just don't like identity politics in it and stuff. And I thought about that, and I thought, that's because nuclear war politics are just far enough removed from your
Mhm.
day-to-day life that it's not a consistent, persistent concern. It should be,
Right. We all
but
have like a sphere of privilege, right?
mm,
And that's why like whenever I get in debates, because you know me, I get in this debate like every other day,
oh yeah.
basically. But like when it comes to identity politics, it isn't like people are trying to, impose it on other people. It's
Right.
simply the acknowledgement that different people with different sets of experiences exist, right?
Yeah.
And if that makes people uncomfortable, then those people need to sit with that discomfort and think about where it comes from. That's going to be the key toward unraveling that.
Yeah, because I mean, that's one of the reasons why, man, there's a great series of YouTube videos called the Alt Right Playbook. That is, it's required viewing if you're going to debate this stuff online, because the guy who makes it from Innuendo Studios, he does a great job of breaking down the mentality behind a lot of this stuff,
Mhm.
behind a lot of reactionary and conservative thought, and coming at it from the perspective of, these people aren't evil, they have a completely different set of moral standards. They have a completely different, it's just a completely different worldview that is antithetical in a lot of ways to a progressive worldview. And there's a point he makes, which is one of the reasons why there is so much pushback whenever you get a black character in a Star Wars trailer, or um, a woman is now Thor, or whenever you have these progressively coded characters, gay characters, non-binary characters, whenever there's pushback, it's because studies have shown that the human brain forms a similar connection to fictional characters that it does to real people. Your
Mhm.
brain doesn't really know the difference between a fictional character you like and a person you like. So the more well written, uh, and not even necessarily well written, the more non-heteronormative, non-white, non-straight characters out there, the more chances there are of one of them being really, really good, well written and well balanced, the more likely people are to like that character and gravitate to that character.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something that a lot of people on the other side of the fence don't want to happen, because um, because then it starts to erode that worldview. It makes their power structures less stable.
Mhm.
Um, which is why I maintain that, like, okay, Godzilla sexuality, whatever, it's a monster. It can be basically anything. That's why I'm a big advocate of, like, just make your characters. They don't just it's like I did with Rulers of Earth. I From the beginning of Rulers of Earth, I said I want Lucy to be gay. And it doesn't. We're not going to make the story about her being gay. I just want that character beat because it's just something you don't see very often, especially in the Godzilla franchise. And I wasn't the first one to do it. There's a character in History's Greatest Monster. He was the demolitions expert. First issue, his wedding was crashed by Kumanga, and his husband, his fiance, his new husband was killed by Kumanga, so he had this like personal vendetta. And it's like that could have been a heteronormative relationship, but it didn't have to be. And it's just that one little nugget, you know.
Well, and that's what I think, that's what quality representation should be, right?
Yeah,
Like, and because the big criticism that a lot of people impose is that, oh, you're making it about who people have sex with, and it's like there's more to LGBTQ plus relationships and existence than just that, right?
sure.
And the fact of the matter is that because we exist, like, we value being able to see ourselves in other situations and other worlds because it helps solidify our existence in a world where we are still struggling to not be erased or minimized or reduced in a variety of different ways. So, and if Godzilla can be a space where we can at least make some small, minuscule amount of representation,
Hmm.
then I say that that is a job well done.
Sure, absolutely. And I know that's inherently very hard because the Godzilla movies right now, and I like the MonsterVerse. I think it's fun. Skull Island is, I think legitimately really well made. Um, but the Godzilla movies are a little on the sanitized side,
Mhm.
personally. I mean, it's also, again, they're not really allowing any room for character development because it's like they got so much blowback from 2014. They were like, well, we can't make it about the people. Um, and although, it's really nice that Kaylee Hoddle was like is such a breakout star from Godzilla versus Kong. You get a
Right.
little bit of representation there. I've learned so much about the deaf community just going to cons with her and stuff.
Oh, see,
It's
that is
fascinating.
what I'm talking about. That's
Yeah,
astronomical. Like, that's
yeah.
astronomically important.
Yeah, and not that it's an enviable position because she does kind of have to represent her community, and that's a lot of pressure to put on
Oh,
like a
yeah.
13, 14-year-old girl. But uh the other challenge is, and this is something that is, man, it's a big can of worms, but Japan is also a fundamentally conservative culture. It's a very regimented conservative, and I'm also not speaking like no culture is a monolith. Let's put
Mhm.
that out there. There's a great resource for LGBTQ rights in Japan. I'll send you the link later. I've been Norman England actually sent me a link. He was like, "Hey, this talk about is Godzilla gay? LOL. That's all fun and all fine and dandy, but you should need to share this. You should probably share this link about how bad it is for gay people in Japan. I mean, it's I mean, same-sex marriage is still not legal in
Mhm.
all of Japan. Like, I think there's some prefectures where it's legal, um, but it is a fundamentally conservative culture, and that's kind of one of the reasons why a lot of conservative people online like anime, because anime doesn't tend to dive into the a lot of mainstream anime doesn't tend to dive into identity politics the way American media does, because they just have different sets of they have
Mhm.
different sets of standards over there. And that's not to say, of course, that there aren't representation. I mean, Yuri on Ice. Can we get season 2, please, of Yuri on Ice? Um, I mean,
Well,
there's
like, I think we can agree that it's so complex that there are many different variables. We, like, Japan's conservative, but we, again, there's like that other layer of like colonialism. Like, how did colonialism affect many of these Eastern Asian cultures, and what like fragments are left over from that too. So,
yeah, it's a great point, and like I said, God, we could talk for like another
oh,
20
I
to
know,
30
yeah,
hours
here,
about this. But you're right. I mean, it's an incredibly complicated topic, and I just remembered like I remember having a conversation with a Japanese friend of mine who like we were just talking about LGBTQ stuff, and he admitted to me, I don't really understand it, but that's my
mhm,
generation. My kids understand it. Like my kids know all about it. So there is incremental change, And but I guess the point I was trying to make is like it's really hard to get a big budget. It's really hard to get a gay character, if for example, into a big budget mainstream Toho produced Godzilla movie. That's not to say they wouldn't do it. It's
Mhm.
just not super high on their list of priorities. It's an ongoing conversation. Toho sharing that coming out short film of the baby of little Godzilla by oh, what's her Biragon on
Yes.
Instagram. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
it's so wholesome.
it's
It's so
so cute.
wholesome.
I cried
I did
when I
too.
first saw that. And I was like, and I messaged her and told her like, oh my god, this means so. This is such a beautiful short film, and then Toho like puts it on their Instagram, and they're just like happy Trans Visibility Day or whatever it
When
was, and
I
I'm just like,
saw
yes.
that, I was blown away. Like, that was so significant for a lot of people in the community. It's that oh,
And last thing, I will say that like it is, and a lot of reasons why companies are doing that is because there is a profit margin to consider and there is
mhm.
a audience to consider. They're like, this is an audience that we can tap into, but it is nice. Like it's nice. It's
Right,
like
yeah.
it's not a net negative. It's a net positive. But I think we also just like it's important to be aware these are companies and their first goal is to make money, but a lot of companies are also recognizing like there is a huge audience out there that is not being served, is not being
Mhm.
catered to, and so it's like, oh, we're doing some good and we're making a little money too. So
Right, yeah, can't
anyway,
if you
5 hours.
can do both things. So, I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
one final question for you.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice for Godzilla fans who may be new to the franchise?
I will say for if you're new to this franchise and you want to get into it, um I mean, start with the movies, and really, you can start with the original, start with the early stuff. But the advantage is that this franchise is so long lasted. I mean, it's gonna be 70 years pretty soon of Godzilla,
Mhm.
and it's gonna get to the point where like there's whatever thing you're into, your that's going to be your flavor of Godzilla. So but I also recommend like don't get discouraged by some of the fandom infighting as well, because that's across the board of any fandom. Uh, in my experience, a lot of the first timer Godzilla fans have really positive experiences because we have such a tight knit community and people are mostly pretty excited
Oh,
to
yeah.
share with somebody new and to educate somebody new on this stuff. Like I said, my assistant didn't know anything about this stuff when I met her like 2, 3 years ago. And she didn't know what the word kaiju meant. She didn't even know that, oh, look, it's Godzilla. She didn't even know that was like a trope because it was so just not on her radar. And now she's just like, oh, King Ghidorah, oh, Mothra, oh, she's just rattling monster names off. And uh, so I would say that, like, even if you watch a Godzilla movie and it's not to your taste, chances are there's another one that you're gonna like. That is gonna be like if you're a big anime fan, you're probably gonna like Shin Godzilla and maybe by extension Singular Point. And I know a lot of like anime fans who actually really like the trilogy on Netflix because
Mhm. Oh,
they
I
don't
liked
have.
it, yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of things about it I like. Its head is up its own ass, but whatever.
Oh, yeah, there are things that I definitely do not like about it, but
Yeah, but like, why couldn't they have? No, that would have been weird. No, it wouldn't have. No, yes, no. Sorry, I'm thinking of. Anyway, I'm just
literally,
like,
that's literally how I think when I'm trying to analyze something too.
I'm just sitting here like, why did he have to pick only one of the Hotua gals? Why couldn't it have been like this weird cultural thing where it's like, well, you're with my sister, now we're like this weird little thruple, and I'm just like, it could have been an opportunity. First sex scene in a Godzilla movie. You gotta give him points for that.
Polyamory representation.
There you go. Come on. Anyway, uh, I'm in a polyamorous relationship with a lizard and a turtle. Thank you very much. But I stole that from Sophie. I'm sorry. Um, so I would say that, like, and if you like old school sci-fi, if you like retro sci-fi, there's a ton of old sci-fi, old school Godzilla movies to watch. Um, the original usually is the place to start as a jumping off point for a lot of fans, for a lot of new people coming into it. Like, I did like a 2-hour live stream about GMK with the Unlikely Heroes crew, and their first thing was like, I didn't expect this to be like a real movie. I didn't expect this to be like good, because Godzilla has this cultural baggage that requires work to brush away.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can be very hokey movies, they can be very goofy movies, but if you want to get into Godzilla, don't worry, there's something for you. I know people who got into Godzilla. This is a little bit of toot my own horn. People who got into it just because of Godzilla Neo, because of this dumb fan thing I made in like 2007, and I'm just
I remember
like,
that.
yeah, I'm just like, people are like, oh man, I that was what got me into Godzilla, and then I started playing the video games, and I'm just like, oh right, because at the time there were no movies coming out, and I'm pretty sure that's the only reason I have a career, is because I was the only person stubbornly making Godzilla fan art.
You
Like,
satiated so many people's thirst for it, right?
which is so funny, because like I look back at my old stuff and I'm just like, that's my personal perspective. That as an artist, like I've got my Godzilla basketball shirt on right now that I designed, and I'm like, this is much better than Godzilla Neo. Anyway.
So, one other question. I know, I just thought of another question.
It's fine.
Artists, like, if there are any aspiring artists in the Godzilla fandom or any other kaiju related fandom, what is your advice for them as they move forward with that?
Industry's full. Go somewhere else. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. There's always room. There's always room. There's always room for new artists and new perspectives. It is a tough industry. I think that's something that I really wish had been impressed upon me more when I was younger, was how hard this industry is. You've really got to be driven to do it. It's kind of a sickness in a lot of ways. You've got to be okay with sucking for a long time. And I mean, you can do stuff and people are going to tell you it's good, especially your friends and family. They're going to tell you it's good, and they genuinely feel that way. But it is because they also love you and they care about you.
Yeah.
But you don't be afraid of people who... I saw this the other day. There was this young fan artist on Twitter who had he'd had a really rough experience. Like, somebody like lectured him on how like mediocre his art was, and it like sapped all of his energy out of him. And I told him, I'm assuming him, sorry, them, I'll default to. So I messaged that, I made a comment and said, I'm really sorry that happened. Critiques should be energizing and educational. You should, at the very least, want to keep drawing purely out of spite. But if you get the same critique over and over again, then it means that that's something you probably need to work on. Really, like, try not to take critiques personally. It's very important that you understand that this person would not be telling you this if they didn't want you to improve or think you could improve. But other than that, try not to take on too much work. I got myself in a lot of trouble recently because I was too many projects at once.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, you're working 12-hour days. It's not fun. Don't be afraid to ask what you're worth. Don't be afraid to ask for money. Because generally people will pay you, but there are certain people and companies who will not pay you if they can get away with it.
Right.
And for kaiju artists, don't just draw kaiju. I made that mistake of only drawing monsters for a really long time and really struggling with people. And they're only my human characters are only just starting to get better. Finally, learn how to draw other stuff. Like, especially if you're going to be in comics, like, learn how to draw like pretty much anything. So even stuff like chairs and desks and boxes and cars, stuff that's like, I don't know, just all the advice, all of it. Don't get student loans. Don't go to college. Watch YouTube videos.
I love it. So, Matt, where can people find your stuff?
You guys can find me over at mattfrankart.net is my primary hub. I've got a Patreon, which is patreon.com/mattfrankart. I have a Substack that I just started, and I'm going to be doing regular updates on that, which is to say I'm going to be throwing a bunch of stuff at Cass, and she's going to be updating it. And that is going to be a newsletter. It's a free newsletter. You can just have it go straight to your email because stuff gets lost in the algorithm so much. Like Redman is coming back out, and there are people who didn't even know I did a Redman comic. So if you follow me on Substack, get an email newsletter through Substack, you'll just get like, here's all the things I have coming out. Here are all the conventions I'm doing. Here's my Patreon. Here's my YouTube. And I think that's the most. As far as like stuff I want to shill. Go buy Dawn of the Monsters. I did some character design work for that. Redman is coming, not Wu-Tang Clan. Redman the Kaiju Hunter is coming back to comic stores. Please go pre-order that because if that does very well, then maybe we can do some other Super Raya stuff. Spectreman Heroes. Try to track that down because I'm working on that with Hiroshi Kanatani, and that is like in comic stores somewhere. So, and I got a bunch of conventions coming out. I'm sure I have other stuff I'm forgetting. I'm looking at my list right now. Nothing I can talk about. Miss Medusa's Monstrous Menagerie issue 2 should be coming to Kickstarter pretty soon. So those are the things.
Exciting things. Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to have a conversation with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed nerding out with you, and I just in general enjoy talking with you, and it really means a lot to me. So,
well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so everyone, tune in for future episodes of Growing Up with Godzilla on the first and third Sunday of every month at 4 p.m. Thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.